Hello everyone, my name is Lanso90 and welcome to a tutorial series for Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf Fortress is coming to Steam soon, so I thought it was a good time to make a new tutorial series for the game. If you haven't played Dwarf Fortress before, it's known as being an incredibly complicated game, if not perhaps the most complicated game ever. It's not as bad as people make it out to be, but there's a lot of information that gets thrown at you and you have to sort out between what's information that matters and what is just the game being more detailed than you can ever imagine. So we're running the starter pack build of the game right now because it's not on Steam yet, and I don't have early access or anything. So if you want to follow along, you can download the starter pack. You can just Google Dwarf Fortress starter pack, and it'll give you like a launcher that you can use to launch Dwarf Fortress. Or you could just get the game completely standalone without the starter pack. But that'll make things really difficult, and it'll be no tile set, it'll be an ASCII. And on that same note, I'm not exactly sure what the Steam build will be. I'm guessing that it will not have the starter pack built in, because the starter pack is pretty much like its own launcher. So I don't expect Steam would have any apps that would, any games that would allow it to launch another launcher. Doesn't make sense. But I do know that they're integrating some features, but as I said, I don't really know what. I'm going to try to go over multiple ways of doing things with either the starter pack or base game, just so you can figure out what works for you. But here we are in the main menu. We're just, there's no mouse interface in this game for the most part. There's a few things that'll work for, but I'll point those out as we run into it. You're going to have to use your keyboard a lot, so here you just use your arrow keys and you press enter to make your selection. If you ever need help with like what hotkeys do what, it's usually down at the bottom or on the right hand side of the screen. But we're going to create a new world here. We're pressing enter on it. Load things up. Don't really need to read that. So here's our create a world screen. World size is basically exactly what it says. This is how large the map is. Large is going to take a pretty long time to render. Small might be a little too small to play on. Just depends on your mood, but if you have a weaker computer, you might want small. But for the most part, medium's fine. History is how much pre-generated history the game makes after it generates the world. So by default, it's on 250 years. You can bring it up to all the way to 1,050 years. All the way down to just 5 years. I would not recommend doing either long or very long, because generating world history takes a lot longer than generating the map itself. And the longer it goes, it gets exponentially longer to generate the history. So we're just gonna do medium, and even that can be a little rough. Number of civilizations, this is how many different nations start into the game. There's only a few types of races in the game. There's humans, elves, dwarves, and goblins. But there can be multiple civilizations of each of them. I am going to crank this up to high, just because there's a problem you can run into where you find a good place to make your fortress, but there's no goblins in the area. And the annoying thing about that is you're just never going to get attacked. So if you want a peaceful playthrough, then by all means, break it down to very low if you want. But if there's no goblins in the area, you're just not going to get attacked by any monsters at all. Well, there's some monsters you can get attacked by, but nothing. Goblin attacks are very organized and like a steady flow of trouble. It's nice to have just so you can play around with the military aspect of the game. Number of sites, this one is something I'm not really as informed on what this actually does. I think it just means the variety of biomes to a degree. We're just going to leave it on medium because I don't really know. Number of beasts is how many legendary creatures are roaming the countryside. So this will be like things like Colossus and or things like that, like mythical creatures and things. And they're very tough to beat. So again, I think we're going to leave this one on medium. And that is separate from civilization, so you can still run into these even if you don't have any goblins around. But they're not the most common thing, unless you crank it up, of course. Natural savagery is just like how naturally evil terrain is. We're going to crank this up to high. It's not going to make too much of a difference, but we don't really want any areas that are completely calm, because that means there's not going to be any animals to hunt. So I'd rather crank it up and risk there being too dangerous than risk it not being dangerous enough. But again, you can consider cranking this down if you're worried. But we should be fine. Mineral occurrence is just kind of like your rare minerals. It'll be like metals and gems and stuff. How often they appear. We're just going to increase that up to 1 step to frequent, so we can have a little bit more to work with. I'm actually going to bring history down to short, just because medium can take a really long time, and I don't want to waste your time. So now it's going to generate the world. You can kind of watch it build it. There's nothing we can really do at this point. It just kind of does its own thing. You can see like what step it's on here. But yeah, we're just gonna let it generate the world. But yeah, that's why we're not generating a long amount of history, because it's going to take forever. Even just on normal settings, it's taking a while. Now it's to the point where it's generating history rather than the terrain itself. So you'll see that these are like roads that are getting built by civilizations. That's kind of the other advantage of not putting too much history into the game, is as these civilizations expand, they're going to tear down a lot of the terrain and stuff, which is going to give you less places where you can start your game at. I wonder what this V is. I've not seen that shape before on this main map. So yeah, I think short is a decent amount of time. Hopefully there's enough goblins around so that we can run into combat. I may have to generate multiple maps until I can find one with a good embark location for the tutorial. I will try to cut that out though if we have to do that. I'm gonna hope that we don't though. So if you haven't played Dwarf Fortress before, or any game similar to it even, the best way I could describe it is it's like a Minecraft where you have a top-down view of the world. And you're not in direct control of one character. Instead, you start with like limited control of 7 characters. Is sort of a way to think about it. The terrain is generated in layers, kind of like a Minecraft world is. And of course, you can chop down trees and mine things out and forge metal, so I think it's a slightly apt comparison, even though there's a gigantic learning curve difference between the two games. But that's what we're here for. So let's see if we had the name of our world yet. I don't think we can see it yet. It'll tell us at the end here. Yeah, see how long this is taking? I'm glad I turned it off of medium, because this is taking a while. Won't be long now. 10 more years now. As you can see, it just takes exponentially longer the further into the year generation you go. Now this is just because the game, it tries to generate very detailed histories about everyone and everything. It's actually incredibly impressive. And then your fortress is just a tiny, tiny, tiny little part of this whole thing. Just about there. Alright, so here's our world. It's the name of the world is Bullermul Kafek. That's like the Dwarvish translation of what it is, and then the English translation is the Cyclopean Plain of Typhoons. That's the name of our world. And we're going to press enter to accept the world. And then it has to do some more loading. Put it on my PCIe SSD to try to help the loading speeds, but I think my motherboard is too old at this point, and it can't really leverage the SSD that well. Come on, little game. This is the longest I've seen it take for a long time. I don't know. I didn't do anything differently than normal, so I'm not sure why it's taking so long. It's kind of unusually long loading time, though. If I had known it would take this long, I would have edited it out of the video, but at this point, we're too far into it. Alright, here we go. So, now we are going to start playing. So you have 3 different game types that you can choose from. There's Dwarf Fortress, which is the base game. There's Adventurer mode, which turns it into like a old school kind of roguelike where you are just in control of one character. You can do quests and things, and then Legends mode is like a way to view all the history of the world that's been generated. But of course, we're going to do Dwarf Fortress. And then there's more loading. And it generates like two weeks of like active new history to the game. This step is actually a newer step. And by newer, I mean like 2 years ago or something. Major updates for this game are a little bit slow to come out. There's hot fixes all the time, but the big content changes come fairly rarely. Because it is a free game. So just do it in their free time when they have the chance. So, here is our screen for selecting a embark location. We have a condensed world view over here that just kind of gives you a general idea of what's going on. And then this is the view that we saw earlier. It's kind of the a much more detailed view of everything. And then here is every one of these squares can be displayed here. It's just that single square that's selected. Our selection is this yellow X that we can move around with the arrow keys. Up in the top right hand corner, we get a bunch of information about the terrain that we have our X highlighted over. At the bottom, you have all your hotkeys telling you what they do. And let's get started. So let's just go over one of these little J's here. These are usually some kind of forest or jungle or something. And I'm going to explain what everything is on the side. So it gives you the name of the area. It gives you what the biome type is. This is a temperate conifer forest. The temperature here is temperate, which is just is what it is. It's just the temperature. Trees, it's heavily forested. That can range between like no trees to, I think heavily forested is the most heavy it can be. Other vegetation can also vary from like none to thick. Surroundings, this is like how difficult the terrain is. And it can go from calm, which is like there's no animals, to wilderness, which is like just your normal North American animals that you'd find in the woods. And then there's untamed wilds, where all the animals, instead of just being normal animals, they're animal men, which are significantly more dangerous. And then there's actually like evil terrain, which can have horrible monsters and stuff running around. And then there's also, let's see if this light blue area has something. There's also like good terrain that will be highlighted in blue. It'll be, say, like serene or something. And that'll seem like that's like a really good place to start, is what it sounds like. But actually, it's almost as dangerous as a evil area, because the animals and stuff there are like unicorns and stuff, and they can really fuck up your people. The stream, there's always a river on every map, but it can be a stream or a brook. A stream has running water, and it's fairly deep as well, whereas a brook, your doors can just walk across it freely, but it's not really flowing water. And then it shows you what the different layers of terrain here are in this area. So there's a sand layer, there's a clay area, there's a very deep soil layer, there's a shallow metal, there's deep metals, and then there's a flexstone layer. And these are generally stacked in like the order at which you find them as you dig down. This is actually a decent little starting location here, if we had to choose one right off the bat. It has everything I would look for. So what we're actually going to do is, now I'm going to be looking at this local area here. We're going to move so that we're on the river itself. I'm going to use the U key to move up, the H key to move to the side. And I'm going to get a piece of this river. I'm going to double check the side to make sure we haven't changed biomes at all. Still what we want. I'm going to press N to leave a note. I'm going to press N again to add a note. I'm going to press Enter to enter text. I'm going to call this site 1. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Oh, geez. I'm going to press Enter. So now this location has been marked as a spot. Press Escape to get out of that menu. But now it stays on the map of where that spot is, so if we ever decide that this is indeed the best place we can find, we can just go right here and embark here. But instead, what we want to do is we want to find a desired location by pressing F. You can change the dimensions of your highlighter. It's the highlighter over here. This is a 4x4 square right now. If you change this, you can change it to like a 5x5 or a 3x3. 4 is pretty safe. If you change to like 5x5, it's probably going to be a lot more CPU intensive. I have a pretty decent CPU, and even 4x4 can cause issues even on like like in the fall, I have FPS issues because there's a lot of falling leaves that happen. So if you have an even weaker CPU, you might want to go down to 3x3. And then a lot of these aren't actually very useful because they don't have the same categories as before. So you remember savagery is like wilderness, untamed wilds, evil terrain. Well, you can see it doesn't say these here. It just says low to high. It's like, well, what does that mean? That doesn't help me. So we're just going to leave it at not available. Evil's the same thing. Can't really mess with it. Elevation, same kind of non-specific thing that's not very useful. Temperature, it's not specific enough. Rain, not specific enough. Drainage, not specific. Flexstone, though, is one that we want. We want to set this to yes, because flexstone is what you need to build steel items. Aquifers, so this one's interesting. With the starter pack, you can turn aquifers off. And what aquifers are, is they are like underground lakes that are throughout the terrain. The problem is they're incredibly common. So you want to, and they're pretty annoying to work around. So normally, people turn this off with the starter pack, which is what I've done here, so there is no aquifers on this map, so I don't even have to change this. But like I said, Steam version, you might not be getting the starter pack or any of those options, so you might have to change this to no. But at the same time, there's usually aquifers completely across every piece of the map, so you might not be able to find anything, so you might want to still leave it at not available, and you might just have to work around aquifers depending on what Steam does. Or say yes for rivers. We already have one unlike the terrain we selected, but we just want to make sure we're only looking at river terrain. Metals. You have a couple options here. You definitely want one, so you have a shallow metal. So you can say yes to just make sure there's at least one, or you can do multiple to make sure that you have plural metals, which could be in the cards, but we're just going to leave it at yes because that's good enough. Deep metal, we'll do the same thing. We're just going to leave it at yes. Soil also kind of has a weird selection, but we're going to do less than or equal to deep just to make sure that we have soil. Then clay, you know, I'm not too worried about it. As long as we have soil, clay, or sand, I don't really care. It's just one of those three is what you need to be able to plant things. And now we're going to press enter to do the search. So it's going to start scanning the map. Everything that doesn't meet these parameters is going to have a red X on it. And everything that does meet the parameters is going to have a green X on it. Again, a larger world or something, this could take longer. It's getting there, and what you'll notice is like everything around mountain ranges tends to meet these parameters, and everything not near the mountains tends to not. I think that's usually the flux stone is what's it's kind of what the deciding factor is, and the mountains have a lot of flux stone and the areas around them don't. However, mountains themselves are kind of bad embark locations, so you kind of have to find a middle ground. But okay, it's finished the search, and you have to be careful which key you press here, because you could be tempted to press enter to say, okay, I like these results, but what that does is it starts a new search. Instead, you want to press escape, and it'll still keep your selections around. So, what are we looking for? Well, everything that we looked at before was good at this location. As far as our tolerances go, for temperature, we want warm or temperate. We don't want cold, or we don't want hot, or any of the other temperatures that you can find. Temperate is pretty normal. The water will freeze in winter. Warm water won't freeze in winter, but your doors are also not angry because it's not too hot. We want trees. Forested is probably fine. Heavily forested is pretty nice. Other vegetation, thick is pretty good, because other vegetation is things like bushes and stuff that can have berries and things on them, which is nice. We prefer to have thick surroundings. We ideally want wilderness. We might be able to make untamed wilds work, but it's pretty dangerous. And calm is going to be pretty low on the food front. And then we would definitely want a stream, and then all those layers there are also very nice layers to have. As far as like a specific biome, I kind of like the temperate broadleaf forest if we can find one. There might not be any anymore. They tend to be pretty rare, but the temperate broadleaf forests are like your oak trees and maple trees and stuff that you're pretty familiar with. I don't really see them. They tend to show up on the map as like spades. But yeah, we mostly just have like conifer forests and things. So since I don't see a temperate broadleaf forest, it's definitely going to be a conifer forest we'll go for then. This location is actually perfectly fine, so let's check some of the other stuff we need to check out first. Every time you move this, by the way, you have to get your position back where it was. So get that there. So to check some of these other things, we have to press tab. So now it shows us our neighbors. We have dwarves, goblins, elves, and humans. That's what we're looking for. We want access to everyone so everyone can trade with us. We want access to goblins so they'll attack us. Again, if you want a peaceful playthrough, maybe not, but I find that kind of boring to play without the goblins around. The next tab is your civilization tab. So there's a bunch of different dwarven civilizations, what these are. And if you watch this map, you'll see these blue U's appearing, upside down U's. And that is where this civilization is. What most people say to do is just to pick the civilization that's nearest to your base. Because at some point, I think it affected caravan time, or if your caravan would even arrive at all. It might not anymore, but why chance it? So we'll probably go with, like, Quiet Tombs. Yeah, Quiet Tombs is about the closest we got to us. All you have to do is just select them. You don't have to press enter or anything. Relative elevation is not really that useful as a map, in my opinion. I prefer this one, which is a cliff indicator. So the 0 is completely flat terrain, and then terrain with a 1 on it means there's 2 layers of terrain. So this is a very flat area, which is great for building on. So this place is perfect. The forests of purging. You will press E to embark at this location. And we'll talk about embarking on the next episode. I hope you all enjoyed this one, and have a good day.